Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. What's your favorite culture building activity?
Whenever I read that question, my first thought was, I used to think our program. And then I heard somebody talk about programming people whenever they hear the media and everything else. And I'm like, man, I don't want to program somebody just to come out here and try to get a win out of them. That's not a good, healthy thought process. So I'm like, what would, a culture in God's image look like? And when you start thinking that, I think, what's his image? I think you think freedom. I think you think things like be creative. He's creative, obviously genius of the world. So are we creative? Are we selfless, loving, forgiving? And how do we become that? So we do a lot of service mentality things that I feel like has changed lives and then made us better as a culture as well. And the more we've served, it seems like the greater hearts we have for each other, and a closeness and a tightness that brings our guys, willing to go the extra mile for each other, like Jesus, did for us on the cross. We start that a lot of times with trips. We're blessed to have the opportunity at times. I've been to Africa with the team. I've been to the Himalayas. I've been to Dominican Republic. In some really, really tough places, Angola, Bhutan, the Dominican, and seeing young kids with a rim of a bicycle on a little tree with a flat ball, and they're happy. I mean, we're trying to paint their little huts, and they're balling out. I mean, they got joy. It doesn't require all the things that the world thinks you have joy. And our guys go in there a lot of times thinking, oh man, we don't have everything. And they come back thinking like, we are blessed beyond measure. Thank you. Sorry, so coach, if I've ever said, complained about a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A or anything, because it just changes your approach. And so, if you're lucky enough to go on trips as a team in the summer, I think that's huge. At the same time, we went to a real small town in Colorado and just did a sports camp / each night we did a thing for the kids and the youth and the adults, ministry wise, but we went out and painted older people's homes and widows' homes, and just took a lot of kids from the city and went to this small little town out in the middle of nowhere. And by the end of the week, it was unbelievable. The growth we had as a team. Then we also got to go enjoy the mountains, and we climbed a 10,000, about a 13.9 mountain.
That's hardcore.
And then went white water rafting the next day. So kids never done stuff like that before. Yeah. So we got to experience an incredible thing right here in the States. Another thing, thought process, if you're not able to do stuff like that, right here in Tulsa, and a lot of the big cities, Tim Tebow has a Night to Shine. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a special needs prom. And it is honestly one of the highlights of our team. You go over, and it's either a hotel or a church, and you get a special needs date, and they set it up, man. It is amazing. I'm in the karaoke room the whole night because I can't sing a lick, and I'm just bringing it, having fun. And they don't have that mean gene or whatever you want to call it. So no matter how bad you sing, if you fall off the stage, they're going to help you and cheer for you like crazy. And there's an angelic quality in that. And my guys, once again, they see the blessings they have. It just changes you when you go out and have that mentality. So we've done that this past year because we couldn't the last 2 years go out of the country or anything. We actually hosted a mission trip just for our own city and put on a concert we call Freedom Fire, and downtown an amphitheater outside, right in the middle of COVID, September, 1,500 people came. Wow. We Are Messengers came. We baptized 40 people in a fountain. Hundreds of people were set free of fear, anxiety, panic, depression. And our guys saw God move like, wow, like they had never seen. This year, we did it for the youth because of the youth, when it comes to suicides up, you name it. It's just sad right now the attack the enemy is using. on kids even. And so we were going after them specifically. So we did more of a hip hop thing, and God brought it all in. Derek Minor, Jonathan Traylor, uh, Cade Thompson. Uh, let's see. I mean, it was once again. I mean, it was hot during the day, and it was kind of one of those lessons because we got there early for guys had to set up and all this kind of stuff, right? And you had to endure probably the setup. We tried to do a little youth thing in the afternoon. It was super hot, but there were some kids that came and stuff. Then about 4 to 6, a couple of the other younger artists, local artists, did some stuff, but they were having to endure some heat. Yeah. And then about 6, that sun went down, and everybody who had the ability to endure and stay through that time got to enjoy about 4 hours of the most incredible, wow. I mean, time of worship. My guys just said, they never experienced things like that. Where it was a Jesus party. It wasn't we worshiped some, we jammed, it was awesome. And so it was neat. I had God, felt like he told me like every tribe and every nation. And I'm like, wow, okay, God, how am I supposed to do that? When I first heard this thing about doing Freedom Fire, it was like back before COVID even hit. And it was January, and I woke up in the middle of the night and felt like I was listening to a message. I fell asleep, and YouTube just kept flipping, and so about 3:30 in the morning, it was some preacher giving a prophecy, and I woke up and it was in my ear, and I just knew it was for me. And it was just kind of a warning that Satan was going to have an attack with fear, anxiety, panic, and depression at a level we hadn't seen. And I'm like, it was great at the time. Everything was going great. Nobody really thought that way. And I'm like, yeah, what am I going to do about that?
Yeah.
And I remember him saying like Elijah, you need to bring my people to a field and do what he did against those 450 prophets of Baal and go on their field and go to work, and worship me. I'll bring my fire down and I'll destroy all these weapons of the enemy. And I'm like, oh, fields of faith. Okay, we did that last year. About 25 kids got saved, for FCA. Bigger. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay. So 1,500 people ended up in a field, in the middle of Bartlesville. And people were in Tulsa and said, I don't even know why we're here. I just felt like we're supposed to drive this way. Just some amazing, I could tell you things you wouldn't believe.
One thing I love about getting to do this and talking with different coaches is just to hear, really the creativity that different guys have, the different things that they do. And there's like a recurring theme kind of throughout what the stories that you're telling is a lot of times we think about culture building activity. It's with our team, it's surrounding basketball. It's how can they be better basketball players, a better basketball team. But there really wasn't one thing. Your culture building activities were your players forgetting about themselves and serving others. But within doing that, like you said, perspectives changed, eyes opened. They're going to be more coachable. They're going to have better hearts for their teammates. And so I just encourage coaches, like when we're thinking about, man, what great culture building activity can I get us to just play better, serve others, and forget about that. Forget about basketball. And you and I have the luxury of getting to work and coach and teach at Christian schools where we can. It's almost our mandate is to be Christ first. It's not about basketball at all. Especially not in the beginning or in first. And so that focus, as far as a team culture, it's amazing how, like when you said that, the Christian value system, when you look at that, even as just a great team culture, that goes right up against, I think, some of the best cultures out there that you hear about, or there's a lot of similarities.
I started with John Wooden, and you can go to Vince Lombardi, and you look at the principles that they applied. They're Christian principles, and they cannot return void. And even people like, I remember reading about the New England Patriots back a few years back, they were trying to go undefeated, and they put humble pie on their T-shirts under practice. So every time they took their pads off, they remembered not to be prideful and humble pie. And I guarantee it, I don't know how much percentage of that locker room is Christian, but they're still applying a principle that cannot return void. And, it's sad that Satan uses a lot of and perverts it or changes it because he can't create. But the world, they see the success we are able to have, or people are able to have when they follow these principles. Look what Baylor did this past year. Look what Gonzaga, one of my close friends, is connected with those guys. Roger Powell, an assistant coach up there, they call Rev, and ORU. I mean, it's just every year I see it over and over again how Christian universities who apply principles and the coaches that live that, they reap reward. I mean, they just have, it's not every year we go through valleys too,
Sure.
But he says he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And
it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine Baylor basketball, those guys this year playing like that. The word joy, it really was when you watch them play. It's like, golly, they're just having so much fun. How can the stars that they have all be playing with so much joy if that word doesn't mean Jesus first, others second, and yourself third? If it doesn't mean that, and if they're not living it out, you don't see a program with that much talent playing with that much joy.
It's just, I mean, over and over. I could just, you could do the same thing all the way back to Team Tebow, and how, I mean, you could go through whenever Curry and Iguodala went through their stretch, and even, it's just, there's going to be a movie about Kurt Warner, all the way back to those kind of guys, and you just see it over and over again. What Alabama's, whenever he was a freshman, and the quarterback came out and halftime the national championship game, and he's just praying. He says the whole second half, and God just goes, and he gives it all glory to God. And it just happens over and over again. Tyson Fury just recently, whenever he's wearing a Jesus hat and going out there in a heavyweight just brawl, and in the end is trying, just to do one thing. He's been into the valley. He knows what it looks like, and he knows God was there and pulled him out of that. And now just giving God glory at every level. The sports is the biggest cool way because, we worship sports, sadly, as a world. And so God's going to use whatever and prove that I can control anything. And I'm going to be a part of everything and raise it. He can stop it, or he can, use it. And I think as we do as coaches, it's one of the most powerful callings there is. And I believe without that calling and without an anointing, like, it's going to get very selfish, and you're going to try to use your kids to win and try to climb a ladder. And where can I got to get another job. And you're always looking at the other side of it. And it's just sad because I did some of that as a young coach as well, without my eyes and focused on really what was the key to being joyful and successful and happy as a father and a husband. Because I'll say this at the end. What would you do differently? And that'll be part of what I talk about then, because it's so funny. I was trying to write down things, that I was going to talk about. But one thing specifically is God doesn't do addition. If it adds up, it's probably not God. He's a multiplier. He breaks and multiplies. And so he loves the three. I mean, I could go all day on the three. You think 12, you think 30's David's 30, then he had his three, the disciples of 12. He had Peter, James, and John, and there's always a one, there's always a John, there's always a Benaiah with David. And, you think the cross, 9 o'clock, he went on the cross, 3 hours later, 12, God, it turns dark, and 3 hours later, he dies. 3 days later, you could just go on and on and on about how God loves multiplication in the three. And so, as we try to do it ourselves and figure out how to do it in our mind, and we forget to apply his principles. I don't make deals with God, but when I took this job 30 years ago, I was 38. I was 38 years old when I was the first head coaching job at college. I'd been 10 years as an assistant coach, and we won a national championship as an assistant coach, and we had, scholarships, and it was hard enough to even imagine doing that then. It was a miracle. But I take a job, Oklahoma Wesleyan at the time in 2007. We have 2 scholarships. They had 6 straight 20-loss seasons. It looked like a absolute nightmare. I had actually turned the job down 5 years prior. The school was about to close. It just looked like there was an impossible situation, completely impossible, to go and have success. And I was just hoping I could have enough success that somehow I could get another job. And I said, but I don't know how we're going to do this, God, and I basically felt like he told me, he'd give me 10 biblical principles. And he said, you apply these principles and you keep me at 50% or higher. And if at any point you think that you're going to drop me below 50% of what we're doing here and the focus, then you're back on you. And I was like, 50, I'm going like, I got to go 75, 80. I can't even think. So that meant cutting out some film sessions and some of the player development stuff and recruiting stuff I was doing, and spend more time trying to teach these principles and do service things and stuff like that. It made no sense how we were going to be successful and do that stuff more. And instead, we went 120-20, won 39 consecutive games. He went nuts. And I'm teaching things like meekness. And what is meekness? And the world would think meek is weak. I thought meek was weak, soft. I'm like, but it says the meek will inherit the earth. And I'm like, well, what's a biblical definition of meekness? And I think Satan's pretty smooth about, flipping words and making it where we won't use that word. And so weak is what, I think people would think. If I asked 100 kids, I said, what does meek mean? 75 of them are going to say, weak, timid. And that word actually biblically means power under control. And I'm like, that is exactly what we're trying to be.
That's right.
We're supposed to be that line of sand that Jesus drew. And we're never angry, out of control, or we're never timid and soft, because that's a sin too. We should be this thing that everybody looks at and is like, nah, that's fearless. That is crazy power. Like, I want to be like them. That's who I want to be like. And so we applied meekness. We applied love over fear. And love never fails. So, fear blocks more shots than any shot blocker. So you apply those principles, and it just made no sense. But it's just been unbelievable to see, that sustained now for 15.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.